Okay, so we are doing chapter 47, and let's just start reading. Let's start going. Now, after all of this, we can understand. Now we can understand the expression of Atzilus, which is the 10th sphere of Atzilus. Shenikra Elam Adibur, it is called the world of speech because it's God speaking. Who captures the God speech? It's the personality of Rachel. Rachel represents God speaking. Alma Diskalia, it represents the world, that's the revealed world. So God thinking was captured by Leah. And God speaking is embodied and captured by Rachel Alma Diskalia, which represents the world that is revealed because speaking reveals. Eimatata, it's called the lower mother. The higher mother is Bina. The lower mother is Malchus, his expression, and it's represented by the last Hey, Shem Avaya of God's name. So the first Hey of God's name is spelled Yud K Vav K. The first Hey, I said K because I don't want to say God's name for not a special reason. So the first Hey represents Bina. This last Hey represents God speaking, Malchus, the Shem Avaya. I've noticed I was learning with somebody on Shabbos, and usually when there's parentheses, it means it's something that's not necessarily for the core understanding, but it's very relevant. It's not necessarily for the core understanding of the subject, but it's really relevant to the theme. So it's known ka'ima bita, like mother, like daughter. The hey la, the bina, the higher hey of bina, ozifas hegvarus, lens, 5 powers of constriction, which are represented by the letters mansepach, which these letters that are written differently when they're at the end of only these 5 are written differently when they're at the end of a word. The bratan, she lends it to the daughter. Hey, these are the 5 expressions of speech, the dibur of speaking canal, like we've mentioned before. And sometimes when God speaks, it's said, we actually, a maimar pesuach means that the speaker, we know who the speaker identifies themselves. So that's maimar pesuach, an open statement, which means, an open statement over here means that we know who says it. In other words, God, and vayom elikim, God spoke. And so whenever you see v'yom elikim, that means which level of God is speaking. We're speaking about the Malchus of Atzilus, that's who's speaking. Because maybe it's God's thought. Maybe God is sharing his thoughts with us. No, but when it says v'yom elikim, no, he's sharing his words with us. He's telling us what he said or what he says. With the God's words, the heaven is made. They were made and they are made. Etc. And on this it says his leadership rules everything, like it's known. It's known in the union of Nasira. Nasira sounds like in English soar, the soaring, the soar, to cut off. Man was created as one, both masculine and feminine in one. Du partsufim hayu. Du is like in the French, un, deux, trois, quatre, right? 2. 2 partsufim, tartsufim means faces. Hayu, they were. When man was created, it was like twins connected to each other with 2 faces. Which really represents what was happening on a spiritual level, that Malchus, God's speech, God's speech was really like a back, glued to the back of Zah, which is God's emotions, and then that sort of mirrors itself in the actual in the actual, that's mirrored in the actual actual creation of man. Like it's written, Etzem Atzamai, when he split, he did the Nasira, which is the soaring, he did the operation. And he said on Chava, his wife, which was originally connected to him, this is by a bone. Like people say that she's made out of a rib. Well, that's not the case. They were Siamese twins. They were like connected twins, and she was on his back, on his back, facing the other direction, according to the Arizal. She was taken from the man. In other words, there was an operation to disconnect her. And when she was like sawed off, then that represents the idea that when God speaks, and it sort of like as if like gets an identity of its own, so then this identity gets its own gets built up in its own personality. Partus b'fnei atzmai, very clearly with light and a vessel. In other words, a soul and a body. Even Hashem Elokim es, God created this tzela, which translated as a rib. But in Hebrew, we know that tzela also means a side. So it's his side. It's his backside. Actually. Now explaining what's going on the spiritual level. Yudua, it's known bezer, and it's known in the Zohar, Eitz Chaim and the Tree of Life, Bekama Duchni in other places. The Malchus Nikris Asiris. The Malchus is called the 10th level. If you want to know, when you go up levels in heaven, how much more energy does the next level have? Usually it's 10. It's always 10x. Why do you think we have 10x down here? Because that's really a spiritual concept, and the concept in this world of 10x. That's because in spirituality, Malchus is a 10th, and then it gets built up to 10x itself, right? Gets its own personality. Now, on the spiritual level, Malchus takes basically a 10th from each of the 10 spheres. So you take all the 10 spheres, and you take 1/10 from that, the expression, and you build it, and it becomes a whole sphere on its own. To every sphere of Zoh. So in other words, Zoh has kindness. Well, we're going to say Zoh as a personality has actually 10 spheres, has an intellect, has emotions. So from, let's say, the emotion of chesed, of kindness, take 1/10 of that expression and put it away in another place. Malchus shall call Asfiris the Zoh, the expression of the 10 spheres of Zoh, Malchus the Chachma, the Zoh, say the expression of the inside of Zoh, Nimshach Bechinas Chachma the Malchus, that becomes the insight of the Malchus. Bechinas Malchus the Chesed, and from the expression of kindness, the Zoh of Zoh, Nimshach Chesed the Malchus, that becomes the kindness of the sphere of Malchus. In other words, there's a direct correlation between the end and the expression of the way these spheres are in Zoh and they are transported and they put together, and this becomes a whole Malchus on its own. Nu kol esespheres the Malchus, and similarly, there was built all the 10 spheres of Malchus like this way, from the Gvura, from the expression of Gvura of Zoh, that expression comes, and that becomes the Gvura of Malchus. Obir bechenas Malchus the Tesfiris, the Zoh. Now it's explaining what is the function and what is the content of the expression of the 10 spheres of Zah, Yidua, and it's known. Shubechinas is galus. This is a revelation. That's what it is. That's what Malchus is. Malchus, we translate as kingship, but how does it function? It functions as a revelation. That's an expression. Shel kol midah, of every single emotion, basphira and sphira, when it comes into a state of revelation, to become something concrete, when it becomes something concrete, something recognizable, just like love, when it comes in a revealed way, you see it's an enthusiasm, in a concrete way. So that's Malchus. People wonder, like, what is man created in the image of God? Well, this revelation, it's also called Tzelem V'Tzura. Tzelem is an image. That Tzelem is the image. V'Tzura is a shape. In other words, the spirituality shapes the matter. Ha'atzmi, the essential, basically the structure. In other words, the image and the central structure, Gitir Atzmi, like the core picture, the chesem of a stamp. And the stamp makes an impact, an impression. And so too, there's other metaphors. The face itself that we have, our face, actually is a revelation of certain emotions. The shape of our face shows the back end of what's going on spiritually. So the shape is a malchus, is a revelation. And that's why a face is made, represents the image of God, because it's a revelation of spiritual ideas. This is the vessel of Zah. On this it says, God and his vessels are one. That really, the energy, when you make a vessel, there's the light of the vessel. And like in a computer, you have the hardware. And it's called bare metal. I know that you have the hardware, and then you have the program, which is the software. The same thing in the body, you have the actual physical vessel, but then you have the program, the soul, or what gives it the body the life. But what limits the soul is actually light itself. In other words, the vessel itself is made up of a compacted light. And that's why we say God and these vessels are one. Whatever limits the vessel is also light. It's just light formatted in a way that it's going to limit light, and that is a vessel. But really, it's all light. It's all one. It's all light. Just it's a different format of light. A vessel is a different format of light. The way vessels are in Atzilus, it's a potential limit. In other words, the way it is in Atzilus, it's God didn't really limit himself yet. He just established, when he decides to reveal it, where that limit will be. So it's more of a program, a protocol. It's really a protocol. The way a vessel is in its Atzilus, it hasn't actually been actualized yet, the limits. It's just a protocol has been written that when God decides to reveal himself, it's going to be in such and such manner and not in a different manner. That's what a vessel is. Like we've written before in chapter 29. So we say that when we say man is made in the image of God, but tell him Elohim, we mean the seal before it makes impact, before it actually makes the impact. It means a protocol, a written protocol to how God will limit himself when he decides to reveal himself. But demus, when we say the word demus, so tzelem is God is made in the image of a man, but demus is a different word for image, and it's the feminine aspect. And the difference, I mean, if you just study electricity, what is plus and minus electricity? It's a feminine and masculine. Well, one is where it's coming from, the other one is where it's going. It's some sort of movement. It's really the same thing, but depends how you look at it. So the feminine energy over here, which is the idea of Demus, the Zah, which means this is not where it's coming from, this is where it's going. In other words, the stamp, the way it makes impression, Shnika Demus Kavod Hashem, and actually becomes the Demus of the honor of God. So that when we say the word Demus, we already mean God is already speaking. God is already speaking. He's already spoken. And it's not the program, the protocol before he speaks, which is the limits and the expression of the 10 spheres in Atzilus. This is when he's speaking. Demus Kavod Hashem, the Demus of the honor of God. The Zah of the Zah, which is a feminine energy, because the feminine energy is where the energy is going. Like it's written in that we will make God in our image, but it uses the word talmenu, which is the masculine, which is the potential image, which is the protocol, the protocol on how to limit himself, his emotions. Kudmusenu means the stamp that's going to be going to be expressed as a result of the program. In other words, when you run the program, when God already speaks. The tzelem beduchra, because the word tzelem beduchra is the Aramaic word for masculine energy. The mus, and the word of the mus is the word for the image benukva in the feminine energy. Vahainu inyan asvan iskalifu. And this is the idea of letters that are hieroglyphic. In other words, they're already made. God spoke already. That is feminine energy. Shubachinas is galos. This is the idea of revelation. Is galos ka'osius, to become real. Ka'osius achesem, like letters of a seal that were already engraved in the receiving format, which is the Shiva, wax, Kaigavna, and similar metaphors. So too in emotional revelation, when you reveal a essential emotion, yes, when it becomes in a revealed way as a concrete, bedibur, words, five mitzvahs hapeh, five expressions of the mouth. Nasa bebechinas yesh. In other words, what do we mean five expressions of the mouth? There's the five parts of the mouth which make sound, which is the throat. One, make the cha, all from the throat. Then the top of the palate, straight up, which is the g, k, right? Up there, the back at the top of the palate. We have the teeth. Sh is made with the teeth. For example, lips, b and p. And the tongue, l is made with the tongue. So we have these five abilities to make sound and vibration. They actually come from spiritual things of Atzilus. Spirit, it's a power that comes from the Malchus, the way Malchus is set up in Atzilus. So when the emotion comes out and already is expressed by the letters, so it becomes something concrete, something that people can recognize. It's something nivdal b'fnei atzmi, something that separates for itself. Shenikra yesh, the yesh is considered the concrete that comes out of the concrete. As is written somewhere else, as it is written somewhere else, at length, when you have the insight that's inside the kindness of the heart, when it comes in a revealed way, mugbal in a limited way, it is still connected with the essence of insight and kindness. Aval gilui, b'dibur, shazel b'chinas maimah here, but once it becomes revealed, and this is the mimer, this is represented by the verse in the Torah. It says, Yehi let there be light. Hum hus nivdal b'fnei atzmei. It already gets its own sort of identity, which seems separate by itself. This is the insight in the kindness, the malchus. So we're repeating what we said before. It's the insight in the kindness of expression, shenimshach, that it gets drawn bebechinas malchus. It becomes the expression, the chachma of insight, the chesed of kindness, shebazah, that was in zah, b'derech prat, in a specific way. Kachu kol binyan prate the esespheres the malchus be'erve kli be'partu b'fnei atzmoi. So is the way we build all the parts of the 10 spheres of malchus be'erve keli in light and vessels be'partu b'fnei atzmoi, and they become a personality on their own. In other words, what he's explaining over here is basically the makeup of the programming, the way it transfers, from the way it is in Zah in potential, to the way it is expressed in potentiality, in potential, in actual. And it sort of gets an identity of its own. And yet every single part that ends up revealed is directly correlated to that level, the way it is in its source. And before the separation, hayudu partzufin, they had two faces, Adam and Chava. And she was like on his back, that she gets drawn along after a face, built him and she didn't really have a built personality yet. So what was going on in Atzilus was that the end of every sphere was just like flowing, was it just in a potential state, flowing and just going wherever the sphere goes. But however, when it's activated, so this suddenly gets activated, this capability of the spheres becomes activated, and it becomes Isgalus the Malchus, and then Malchus, the expression, becomes revealed. Ki yesh bechlal masayim, because inside 200 there's 100. In other words, everything that you see in Malchus already existed in the potential level in Zah, because you're in a $200 you have $100, and then we decide to make a split and reveal the aspects of it which are transferable to be revealed. Because of makamacha be'inyan beprat inyan acher be'acher bepanim. So this is the three ways that Chava was a Siamese twin to Adam, and there are three opinions. And Achar Ba'achar means they were totally back to back. They were facing, their faces were facing the other way, east to west. V'achar B'panim, another way is that her head was actually facing the back, her face was facing the back of his head. That's Achar B'panim. Uman Amar, and there's an opinion that says Zon of Haya, that she was actually a tail, his tail, Adam's tail. Those are three opinions. I believe that the Arizal Paskins that they were facing away from each other. Achar Ba'achar, the first one. But in any case, no matter which way they were, all of these represent spiritual, a spiritual makeup. Mitchila hi nekuda tachas hayud dezah. And in the beginning, she was just like a dot under the yud, tachas hayud dezah. So in other words, the zah, and her spiritual makeup was just like a dot that's totally nullified to she didn't even have like a personality at that point in time. She was in a potential state. And Malchus sometimes fluctuates. The way Malchus, God speaking, fluctuates, and it changes its format. And sometimes when special people behave in certain ways, that represents and that causes spiritual things, the spiritual worlds to mirror that way. Like it's written, that Esther, when she was begging for her people, she fell in front of the feet of the king. Now the king, even though he's not a good guy, but the fact that he's a king, he represents divinity in certain ways, and she represents Malchus. She represents God's expression. So what happened is Malchus needed to connect to Zah at that point in time. In other words, there needed to be a reallocation. No, not allocation. They needed to connect and recharge, like it says in Commission Gospel Zohar, like it's written in the Zohar, al pasuk, God, they make God's speech. In other words, we do what God says, or we actually, our behavior causes God to say certain things. So Isid Dvara could be mean, they make God speak through their behavior. Like everything in the spiritual world comes from us. So we can actually change our behavior, and we cause a mirroring effect in spirituality, and then that has a global effect. Azira's Garma Kanukuda, she made herself Esther, she made herself small like a dot. And that represented a new rebirth of God speaking in a way that would be positive, in a revealed way for the Jewish people. Ad Heid Kamala Kadmin. I forgot what this means. We'll have to circle back. Now, sometimes if you don't understand something, doesn't mean you stop. Get back to it later. And sometimes if you read further, you start remembering what it means. So basically, nivnes partuf bevechinas atzilus achechinas panim befanim. So then, by reconnecting and becoming like a dot, totally nullified from God speaking, then she was able to rebuild the parts of the personality of God speaking, as if it having its own personality, bibiyah, in a revealed way in the worlds of God's thought, speech, and action. Shenista kol partzufa. One second. And then she faces Malchus and she grows her personality until she's standing face to face to the king. Okay, another metaphor we see is when the moon gets smaller and then when the moon gets bigger. So when the moon is totally invisible, it's actually in the closest place to the sun. So it's sort of recharging. So when Malchus is totally nullified to the husband, she's actually recharging that she can go back and deliver. You know how they say you have certain people that are introverts, and introverts means they like to be by themselves. But they also extroverts spend time with other people. What an introvert really means is that they get their energy from being by themselves, and then they go and able to deliver to other people. But they're an introvert because they get their energy from being by themselves. So too Malchus, it nullifies itself to the husband, God's emotions, and reconnects. It's like sort of introverting up, and then she's able to build her personality again and go back to the world and give. In other words, this time God's speech is sort of like a person tired from speaking. They stop, they take a break, they re-energize, and then a whole new level of speaking comes out. And this time the story was much more positive in a revealed way. And this is the idea of a moon, that a moon is actually energizing itself when it's getting closer to the sun. It's a metaphor. It's energizing itself when it's getting closer to the sun. So you don't see the moon when it's getting the most energized. The Malchus. And that's the idea, the concept of building the Malchus, building God's speech. So when the God's speech is reconnecting, recharging with the emotions of God, that is actually a higher level than building the Malchus as a personality for itself, b'biyah, in the worlds of Bria, God thinking, speaking, and doing. Shnista kol partzufa b'chinas Atzilus. When Malchus goes to the Atzilus, to the high level to recharge, it sort of like loses its personality. But then when the Malchus is established and it starts to be activated, so the Malchus means it becomes activated. We've learned this before. Malchus is revelation. The Malchus means becomes activated. It breaks through the curtain, and it becomes a personality, a recognizable personality, bibiyah in the creation, means when in God's thoughts, which really creates the hidden worlds. I'm going to explain this more. Chulu v'dal. Now we're going to learn a little more before we stop. I think we should stop and continue next week. But we'll say something practical, because we need to say every day, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one." And that's really what we're learning this whole time. We're learning how to fulfill this commandment of connecting everything to the oneness of God. So he's saying this is the theme behind the last word. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one," and the one is spelled echad, and it has the daled is a big daled. It's spelled big. I've shown it before on the videos. Shu Bechinas, godless parts of, maybe I can show it again quickly. You can see it's a big daled, 4 times like 4 times higher than the other letters. So yeah. 1 second. This is the idea of this big Dalet of Echad. Shu bechinas gadlos parts of Nukfa Dezah. What that represents is the greatness of Malchus, the parts of the personality. The face is a personality, parts of Nukfa, of the feminine aspect of Zah. The way it goes, Gadlus means the way it goes to its source. But when it goes to Atzilus, Dafka specifically, the way it connects to the Atzilus, to the higher level, it connects to its intellect, connects to the emotions, to each. The light is in the potential vessel. Like it's written, God built the side, not the rib, the side of man, Abba Ve'ema, Batilus. Who is God? Who's building? So that's God, the way he is in the format of Abba Ve'ema, the Atzilus, of the mother and father of the Atzilus, which is the insight and comprehension of Atzilus. The Banula, the insight and the emotion, the insight and the comprehension of Atzilus build a potential Malchus, build the framework and the protocol of expression of God. And then once they've built the program, they run it. V'amrula and Abba Ve'ema of Atzilus, that means the insight, the Chachma, and the Bin of Atzilus, say to this Malchus, to this expression, Zili Nitri Besa, go guard your house. Now, in other words, go express, go run the program, execute in a file. When you want a program to actually like do something, instead of just being potential, you write at the end exe, and it like gets executed, gets done. So that's what they say. Zili Nitri Besa, go guard your house. Go be the driving force for the world, for the world, which is God's thought, speech, and action. I'm just going to say another one. Like it's known, binyan berach afru asarim. There was a well that was dug by the princes. Sarim is like the English word sir, like the knight, right? But it's yud mem. It's 2 nights. I believe it means Moshe and Aaron, but it also represents insight and comprehension. And bear and the wellspring it's God's expression. I think I have to continue a little more. Who this means God's expression in the machshava, still the way it's in potential and thoughts. Shezeu Dalet Rabasi, that is the big letters Dalet. Whenever in a Sefer Torah you have a big letter, it means this idea, this emotion, the way it is in the thoughts, in its potential. That's why it's big. And that becomes machshava, that becomes the thought that runs the dibur, the actual speech. In other words, people usually don't speak anything unless they think what they speak. So this becomes the thinking which drives the speaking, the divine, the high speaking, the Zah of God speaking, and this potential thought, it's actually has 10 spheres, has lights and vessels that are going to limit what can be done. Shuhu Malchus the test spheres Zah. In other words, the expression of all the 9 spheres of Zah that becomes built as something for itself. V'hainu aleph ches dalet, and that's why when we say the word echad, one, God is one, it's actually spelled aleph ches dalet. Aleph numerically is 1, ches is 8 numerically. 1 plus 8 is 9. These 9 spheres, they create Daled, the God's speech and potential. Here. So this is Shema Yisrael. Wait 1 second. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Aleph 1 Ches 8 Daled. These 9 spheres power God speaking and potential. He hasn't spoken yet, but it's been configured. It just hasn't been executed yet at this point in time. Done. Like he's explained somewhere else. So that's why man is not so much praised for his intellect, but for his ability to speak. He created a spirit that talks, that communicates. And we really, with our ability of communication, really we're just capturing the power of God and how he rules everything with his speech. Yud Maimaris, and he actually creates everything. Yud Maimaris, with 10 sayings, God creates the world. And I notice that I say creates because he's continuing to speak, and that's what's making the world run and exist. Vayem Elokim, God spoke 10 times, and he keeps on saying those 10 things, and that creates the world. Kiyadua, like it's known. Should we? No, it's going to be problematic next week. So I'm just going to continue. Bechinas Kesed de Malchus, the Atzilus. Now, the crown of the expression of Atzilus, Hu Bechinas Kayach Adibur, that represents the power of potential speech. Kayach is power and potential. Terem Shemispashal Daber, before he actually speaks. Bechinas Sechel Umidus, it's already the intellect, before even it makes the intellect and emotions Shebadibur in the speech. Shutes Firas the Malchus, which the intellect and the emotion of the speech, the power speech, is the 10 spheres of Malchus Behind Inyan Lo Olam Hashem Dvar Nitzav Bashamayim, and go back. This is the idea that it's actually written, forever God, your words stand in the heavens, because God's words make the heavens all the time. They are the heavens. That's why God's words stand in the heavens. This is the Zah. Shamayim is Zah. So Shamayim, heavens, is actually made out of 2 words, Eshamayim, fire and water. And basically that means water is liquid, Ash is fire, hot liquid is gas. Hot liquid is gas. So it's heavens. But it's also the emotions of fire and water, which is kindness and strictness. So both of those emotions put together, that's what Zah really represents. And the power of speech is actually glued to the chest of Zah Tamid all the time. So our physical anatomy is a mirror of the spiritual makeup. So in our physical anatomy, we have the windpipe is glued. The windpipe, which creates our speech, is actually glued to our lungs, which have emotion. The way we breathe, it affects our emotions. Tamid, and it is always glued. Otherwise, we won't be able to speak. Commission Gossel, Beit Chaim, like it's written, Eitz Chaim, and it's explained in another place. Veispashtus Amalchus Mislabeshes, Vehispashtus Amalchus Melabeshes Latiferas Netzach. How do you say Dezah? Basically, the Malchus spreading becomes a glove. Melabeshes becomes a glove, like gets enclosed, of Tiferes, which is the central emotion, the balanced emotion, and then Netzach is the emotion of going for it and winning. Hoid is the emotion of retracting to a position of strength. Yesod is the emotion of attachment. And basically, Malchus is just a glove which is expressing these emotions. The Zah of Zah, Shubechinas Dalis, and Malchus is represented by the Dalet because it's like the four. Dalet is four of the four sides of the world: north, south, east, west. Malchus Nikra Dal, and Malchus is generally called Dal, which means low because it doesn't have anything on its own. It needs to be powered. Shirish Binyan Malchus, and what causes Malchus to be built and configured on its own, it's actually from the kindness of Zah, actually configures this expression of the divine. It's actually written that God's chair, which represents Malchus, God speaking, his position, right, is established with kindness. Ashrei maskil al dal, happy is the man that thinks about Dal, Malchus, the lowly. Chesed, and what does chesed mean? What is the definition of the term chesed? So chesed is made out of 3 letters, like most Hebrew words. So chas means, chas means be quiet, right? To look after something. Don't make a big deal about it. Take care about it. Take care. Be quiet. We need to take care. So chas, take care of the daled. That's what kindness is. Take care of that. It's very parental. Kindness is parental. We're going to take care. We're going to guard something. But Malchus, Leisla Begamar Klum, and Malchus alone doesn't have anything. It needs to be, it all totally depends on what it receives. Only what she receives from the masculine energy, which is Zah. Being in Iskalos, the Iskalos, it's basically you have the revelation, but then the revelation has to be executed. So it's a revelation of the revelation, an actual commercial. Like basically the way Malchus feminine energy works is like the moon that receives from the light of the sun. In other words, it mirrors the light of the sun, but it's not it configures it. It's not the same. There's certain vegetables that grow specifically from the moonlight, but it's the sunlight, the way it's expressed by the moon. So the moon does something amazing to the light that it's very good for the hay that the cows will eat. You're supposed to do it on a full moon. And there's also many vegetables that grow specifically from moonlight, not from sunlight. The Sihara Leisla Megamara Klum, the moon doesn't have any light on its own. It receives the light, but then it configures it in a way that it's very beneficial that even the sun in a way doesn't have. Zon nukva hayu, zun hayu, Shav and Kamason, when they're both equal and facing each other, equal of height and facing each other, just like the sun and the moon were at the same size before God decided to make the moon smaller. They actually, in the Torah calls the two lights, the two big lights. However, in the future as well, it says, the light of the moon will be the same as the light of the sun after Mashiach comes. So it's going to represent that God's speech is totally congruent. That's the word I was looking for. It's totally congruent with God's emotion, and that will be represented. In other words, we see a total congruence between God speaking, creating the world, and his emotions, and that's going to be represented by the fact that the moonlight will be the same as the sunlight. And there's actually two levels when we're building expression. The first thing that needs to happen is it needs to be configured that it's something separate. And then it needs to be activated. and become a leading head of Biyah, of the revealed worlds. And this is what's expressed in another place. God said to the moon, make yourself smaller, get activated, start feeding the world. This is the idea of the Malchus becomes the king, the head of the foxes. In other words, the foxes bibiyah. In other words, you can either be a tail of the lions or the head of the foxes. So Malchus goes down and says, you know what? I'm going to lead the foxes. I'm going to go to bibiyah in the world, the creator of the world's commission. Kosov Vesamer, it's written the small light. Lemeshelas Alayla was given to run the night, to rule the light. In general, the whole idea of Atzilus, God's personality, is called day. Omidas Halayla, and the night, Malchus, that represents the idea of Malchus, the idea of God speaking, but we don't see the speaker. We don't necessarily see how it's congruent. God's speaking hides itself in the creation. It's not apparent that it's totally congruent with God's feelings. As I'm going to explain very soon, which that word bashkalamu represents Baruch Shem Kved Machusei La'olam Va'ed, which is what we say right after saying Hero Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Then we say, blessed is his name, of the honor of his kingdom forever and ever. And that represents the way God's speech is already configured and activated in the creation and the running of this world. That is already when God breaks through the curtain. We don't mean the actual curtain. We mean that the curtain basically separates the way God's personality is and the way he decides to present himself. So that's and then his personality breaks through in the communication into this world. So there is a way to trace back everything back to the oneness and back to God through the curtain, which is a metaphoric curtain. And what we've said is enough for the understanding. And that's it for this week. So we're really learning the lower unity, and it's something that people should be good at. It's very important to read it over, to go inside, read this over again and again, to be familiar with the terms and the terminology, because these are themes that are repeated again and again.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Chirik. Any questions? Okay, not seeing any questions. We'll pause this and we'll say some of the parsha.
Okay, I'm gonna go connect.
Chirik.
Okay, all the best.